So, good morning. We already reached 10 external people on this in the podium, so that's absolutely great. My name is Jens Bartolmes. I'm working for the European Commission for the Director General of Energy, and we are going to present to you together with three of my colleagues from the projects, the Lighthouse project, that are now... Lighthouse projects are something, as you see, all this... Does that work? No, it doesn't. I mean, all the points that you see here are the more than 100, actually it's 117 cities that are participating in this very large project cycle. It's under Horizon 2020, the European Framework Project for Innovation and Research. And we spend close to €500 million on that project, so they're very big, each project, thank you. Every project between 20 and 25 million euros of co-funding from the Commission, plus obviously the investments that are coming from the cities. These are projects that bring together cities, industry, SME, research, grassroots movements, so really big consortia, over 40 in some cases. And what are they doing? I mean, obviously, it's already said in the title, smart cities and communities. So these Lighthouse projects consist of consortia that are built of 2 or 3 lighthouse cities. These are the cities that are trying new solutions, that are pushing innovation. They are getting the big chunk also of the funding. And then there are the fellow cities. Yeah, it's more like that. So that's why there are a little bit more fellow cities, obviously, than lighthouse cities. Fellow cities are the cities that are learning indirect. Does it work? No, that works. I was looking for the pointer. The pointer.
The pointer is here.
Okay, that's why the pointer on that thing doesn't appear. Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's why I try. So they implement the solutions from the beginning, but they plan them together with the fellow cities. So the fellow cities are not just waiting 5 years of project duration that there's a good solution coming out, but they define in some cases already what will be tested as a solution from the beginning, and then they're very eager actually to learn by doing, by looking, because like this, after some years, they will be able to directly implement these solutions in their cities without having all the initial problems that the lighthouse cities might have encountered. And they always now do not work in small projects, because each of those might be three big cities working together in various parts, plus the associated fellow cities, but now they are really working as all these cities together, because beyond the project level, we also have the Lighthouse group level. So this is really a very, very strong group, and some of the coordinators proudly call it also, and I think I'm going to do the same, one of the biggest ever smart city projects worldwide, because with $500 million from our side, plus a leverage factor up to 1 to 20 in some of the cities. It goes in the many billions scale. And actually, it's a very long thing. It started in 2014, and it will run until 2025, when the last projects will come to an end. So, and now I already come to my end here, because I will hand over to the 3 coordinators of the first 3 projects that are coming to an end now, after the first 5 years. They have gathered a lot of experience. They have learned a lot by testing these solutions, by working together with the others. And I hand over to Lisa from Stockholm and the project GrowSmarter.
Thank you. So we are the 3 first projects that started, and we will finalize our project this year, or some are going to go on for some more months. And I'm Lisa Enarsson from City of Stockholm, and we are coordinating the GrowSmarter project.
My name is... My name is Miguel Garcia. I work for Cartif, which is a research institution based in Valladolid, and I'm coordinating Remourban.
My name is Trinidad Fernandez. I work for Fraunhofer Research Institute in Germany, Stuttgart, and I coordinate the Triangulum project.
I think we need to be behind the speakers or something. Yeah. So these are the cities that are in our 3 projects. So you can see we're covering the whole of Europe. And first of all, we want to brag a little bit about how much we have actually done during these 5 years, the impact that our project has done. When it comes to renovated square meters, we have renovated 228,000 square meters together. And we have energy savings of 16 gigawatt hours per year. So this will continue for a long time after our project has finished.
Okay, so we've been working in energy, but also we've been working on implementing actions related to sustainable mobility in cities. And in these terms, we have implemented in our 9 cities, in the 3 projects, more than 200 alternative fueled vehicles, and these are leading, together with the energy actions, to more than 7,000 tons of CO2 emissions avoided to the atmosphere.
And one thing, we have energy, we have mobility, but we also have another impacts within our project. So in general, we have the funding of the European Commission that's around 70 million, so we're really pleased to have them. But also we can proudly say that we have engaged nearly 50,000 citizens here in Europe. So it's a small stone, and we hope that this will be replicated through time. And regarding replication, we are also really proud that we started the first 3 projects, and now we are doing actually and going beyond, creating also spin-offs, creating new businesses for smart cities in Europe, and also creating new projects and other initiatives that are coming from this smart city discussion that we are opening here in Europe.
And to be able to do this, we have seen that we really need brave politicians behind us. And in the city of Stockholm, we have politicians that have decided that we should be fossil fuel free until 2040. So this is really an ambitious goal that we are working for.
Okay. And also, not only that, we need to also have politicians that believe in innovation. And for example, we have the city of Eindhoven that comply and get the vision of becoming the Dutch and the European innovation hub of Europe and maybe of the world. So it's a big challenge, but they are aiming to that.
And we also need, in order to be able to transform our cities into smarter and more sustainable places, to think in the long term. So we don't have to think only in short-term actions and the immediate impacts that we can have with these actions, but thinking on the long term and how we can transform the city during, many years in order to achieve our goals. And one of the examples is the city of Segan that we have in Remourban, which is a follower city that had a really hard industrial sites in the past, but now is reinventing the city, taking advantage of these abandoned industries that were in the city in order to create a new plan for the city based on renaturing some of the areas, on rebuilding and retrofitting some of the buildings, and working in order to achieve important goals in terms of sustainability and also smartness.
So now we're going to give you some examples from the 3 parts, the low energy districts, the mobility and the integrated infrastructure, and some recommendations that we have found during these 5 years, which we also have in a policy paper, which we want to spread to both the Commission, but also the national level and the city level, with things we think are important to scale up these smart solutions. So I'll start with the low energy district. You know that around 40% of the energy used in Europe is from the building sector, and 1/3 of these buildings are actually from the 60s or 70s. So if we don't do anything with this part, the building sector alone will cause the 2-degree increase of the CO2 emissions. So it's really important to work with the existing buildings and do energy efficient refurbishment there, and to add renewable energy. And in Stockholm, we have renovated buildings like this in Valla Torg, and we have been able to show that it is possible to reduce energy by 80%. And this is done by working with a climate shell, where they actually have put in 4 glazed windows, so they're really energy efficient. They are so energy efficient, so there's actually ice on the outside during some winter days, so maybe that was to go a bit too far. But then we also have worked with a heating system in the building. So as you can see here in this picture, it's only 2 degrees that goes out. We keep all the heat within the building with a smart energy ventilation system, and also hot water system. And these buildings have also supply from the district heating in Stockholm, where the district heating, the company, they have used waste heat from data centers. So the waste heat is put into the district heating system, and that heats 1,000 apartments instead of that heat just going up to the air. I think this is a really smart solution, and also a very good business for both the data center that gets money for waste heat and the company who doesn't need to produce that kind of the energy that they get from the data center. So to facilitate upscaling in the energy part, we see that it's really important to work with a combined structural energy efficient retrofitting. When you do other more structural or aesthetic renovation, then you should also add the energy efficiency measures. And we think actually there should be some kind of regulations to promote that you have to do energy efficient renovation when you're doing other kind of renovation. And we also think that the energy supply regulation should be on a community level, not on the building level, as it is at least in Sweden. So you can use the best roofs for photovoltaics, even if that building doesn't use that much electricity. So if you look at a community level, it's easier to use all that electricity in that neighborhood. So that's also, we need to update the regulation to facilitate installations of photovoltaics. In Stockholm, there are lots of restraints that so it's not so much implemented as it is now. And we need regulations also demanding that the waste heat is used from, for instance, data centers. And we also need some kind of financing of the retrofitting. For the building I was showing, the housing company, they say that 50% is okay to renovate for a business point of view from their point. So if we want to go to 80%, we need some kind of finance for that part. And maybe that should be some kind of crowdfunding, because it's not them who are the main benefiters. It's more the society. So maybe like healthcare or the police department should be putting money into a fund, because they are also benefiting from renovating this kind of areas. We also think it's a good idea to do, as we have done in Sweden, to introduce CO2 tax. And we also need to educate more energy efficiency workers, because that has been a lack when we have been renovating. So we had to wait for enough people to do the renovation. It wasn't possible to do in that speed that we wanted to do it. And of course, one of the main points, we need to ensure the citizen engagements to do renovation, because there are people living there already. So now we go over to Miguel and the mobility part.
Thank you. So the second pillar in which we've been working in our projects is the pillar about mobility in order to deliver a more sustainable mobility in cities. And for this, we need to understand which are the challenges that we are facing in these terms. And all cities, well, all over Europe are facing more or less the similar problems in this field with different scales, obviously, but more or less the same problems. Urban mobility is responsible of 40% of the CO2 emissions related to transportation, and it's also responsible of 70% of all the other pollutants that are related to transportation. But beyond that, we are facing other issues and other problems in our cities, as for example, congestion or safety, in which we have to work in order to improve the situation. And for this, the main mechanism in order to overcome and to solve these problems and these issues is through creating a new culture of urban transport. So it's not a matter of a technology, of a specific technology, but it's a matter of creating a new culture of the way in which people is using transportation in our cities and the means that we are providing for this transportation. So in Remourban and also in the other two projects, we've been working on implementing these different actions in these fields. And the example that I'm bringing today is about the city of Nottingham, where we've been working in order to deliver this new, or to create this new culture of urban transport, which is based on three main pillars. The first one is about technology, about providing alternative fueled vehicles, especially for public transportation, and providing the charging infrastructure in order to charge all these vehicles. The second one is about ensuring that using these alternative fueled vehicles is faster for the people. And then the third one is to ensure that it's cheaper. In terms of the technology, they have now the largest fleet of electric buses in Europe, and they've been working in the project in order to deliver a big depot in order to charge all these vehicles, ensuring that also the energy that is feeding these vehicles is coming from renewable energies. In terms of ensuring that these alternative fuel vehicles are faster for people, they've been working on an integrated sustainable mobility plan for the city, in which they are prioritizing the use of electric buses and the use of public transportation for the citizens. For this, they have priority lanes for the buses, and also they have increased the fines for people that are, for example, parking in places that are reserved for buses. So in this way, they are penalizing the people that is somehow blocking that this alternative mean for transportation is faster for the people. And then, in terms of ensuring that it's cheaper for the people, they are also, they've been working on both subsidizing for the specific collectives that have somehow problems in order to access to this kind of public transportation, for example, elderly people, or also disabled, or people that have some kind of problems. So they are, supporting and giving some subsidies to these people. And also, they are, somehow penalizing to those that are using private vehicles, and also, vehicles that are not alternative fuel and that use somehow traditional fuel, in the sense that they have some increased taxes that are also, somehow feeding the business model in order to implement these alternative vehicles. So working on these three pillars in an integrated manner is the way in which Nottingham has achieved this transformation of the city in order to, put this alternative mobility for the citizens high on the city agenda. And there are some lessons that we have learned, not only in Nottingham and not only in Remourban, but also in the 9 cities that we are representing here today from this first generation of Lighthouse projects, that are, some of these that you can see in this slide, and also those that we have included in this policy paper that Lisa was mentioning at the beginning. So some of the lessons that we have learned is that, we have to work on, when we are thinking of this alternative fueled mobility, and especially on electromobility, we need to work also on ensuring that the electricity feeding these vehicles is coming from renewables, because otherwise, we are not solving the problem. So we need to implement the specific directives that we have for this in order to ensure that all the electricity that we are using is coming from these, alternative sources. also, we need to work on standardizing, on standardization, and to standardize the charging infrastructure that we have across our cities and the way in which users are using this infrastructure. So we need to deliver, well, common methods in order to access to these charging infrastructures so that people, well, traveling from cities to cities, they have the possibility in order to charge on the different points. Also, we need to continue working on the technology in order to decrease the costs of some technologies, for example, the vehicles, or especially the batteries. So this is something to continue working on. And we need to work also on harmonization and somehow, well, improving the regulatory framework that exists for some of these alternatives. For example, when implementing technologies as vehicle-to-grid, vehicle-to-X, we need to solve some of the issues that still exist when implementing these solutions. But especially, and on top of all these well, recommendations, we need to work also, and this is something that Lisa was also mentioning, we need to work on education and engagement of people. So it's essential to work with people on implementing all these solutions, because otherwise we will not be able to ensure that they will be using these alternatives that we are providing to them. So education and engagement are essential for all the different actions that we have implemented and demonstrated in our projects. And now I pass the floor to Trinidad, who will be showing the third pillar of our projects, which is about ICTs.
Okay, thank you, Miguel. So I will be sharing a bit regarding what is the integrated infrastructure. As its name says, it's integrating all our urban systems. So when we are speaking about ICT data, what it is behind is a tremendous potential for our cities to become more sustainable, because we are talking about automatization of processes, we are talking about cost reduction, we are talking about making all these systems that are running in energy, in mobility, in different sectors from our city to make it more efficient. So that is the core, but also it allows us not only to reduce costs for our cities, but also it allows us to engage in a better way and to address in a better way sometimes also the needs from our citizens, because we are doing the cities for livable and for our citizens. So I will present you some of the well, one example that we have in our Lighthouse city from Eindhoven, that it based actually on what the tenants want. And it's basically what we had here in our project is that we developed together with a social housing agency a tool that it was a co-creational tool where each tenant could see their house in a 3D model. So as you can see here. So each tenant could see how, and the idea was to engage them in refurbishing their own houses. So they could see in real time in this platform how their house will look like, how much energy will they save, how much money they will save from their energy bill. So it was also encouraged them and to learn also about different options that they have to reduce energy through this ICT solution. So at the end, it wasn't about data, but it's about using the technology to engage people in the better way. And in this case, the tenant or the citizen become really owner of their own renovation process. And that is what SMART is about. It's not about deploying a lot of sensors and measuring a lot of fun stuff here in our cities, but it's about including them and trying to make it in service for the citizens. And that's the example from Eindhoven in this building modulation system. And also to facilitate upscaling and to address one of the lessons learned we have from our 3 projects, we need to start understanding the SMART. It's not about the coolness of our solutions. It's about how we put the solutions and offer to the citizens to understand their needs, to address their needs, to make their life in the cities more livable. Another lesson learned that we have is that ICT and these communication systems needs to be a priority for our politicians. So we heard also that from my colleagues that energy and mobility is also a priority, but ICT and the data is being gathered in all the cities, and it should be a priority to become more innovative, to engage together, and to work that cities, businesses, and academia work finally together into understanding and addressing the citizens in a better way. And another thing that we learn in this journey is that, and something that already my colleague Miguel mentioned, is that we need to work together as in European level and also in the whole world about standardization. It cannot be that we are speaking different languages when we are all going to the same goal. We are all developing in our cities open data platform, gathering the same data. We need to start speaking the same language and to find a common field where we can also, and also a lesson learned, and why we are really proud to be here, to speak about the same, but also to share our experience. We don't need to reinvent the wheel every time, and we need to start sharing our experience and also learning from the others. And that's why we are really also proud to be part of this smart city family. And last but not least, we need to understand also the potentials of the technology. As I mentioned in the very beginning, and also to conclude, is that it's not about cool, it's about our cities, and it's about our citizens, but it's about also putting our technologies and offering them, and be behind that. Think behind the technology and think more about how can we improve our cities and make them more livable. So now I will give the word to Jens.
Thank you. So the moderator is still here. We heard that you are now preparing, you prepared already a paper with all these recommendations. They are stemming from experience that you have. Now you're all Lighthouse cities. You're the ones that actually implemented the solutions. Can you tell us a little bit more on how some of the solutions have been already replicated or starting to be replicated in your follower cities, and what are for them the most low-hanging fruits which actually work wonderfully, directly going from trying it out to replication in other cities? Lisa.
Yeah, actually, I was thinking most of Valletta. They have very quickly started to start up car sharing clubs with electric cars.
Okay.
So they have actually spread some stations around the whole island. So I'm really impressed by that. And they also, to fund this, they also looked for funding at the EU Commission, I think. So that is already implemented and set.
But there also one of the big parts in the project was to check if the business models are actually sound.
Yeah.
Is that something that after an initial investment you think is going to be mainstream also in the south of Europe?
I'm not sure that they would be able to have own money in Malta to do it, because their economy is not that good. And we can also look at Suceava, that's the same there. They have also looked for other EU funding to be able to implement some of the solutions. For instance, the smart lighting, they have changed all their street lighting to LED lights during this period. So they have also been inspired by that, but they have also got funding for doing that. When I was there, I was thinking, well, is that the first priority they should do? Maybe education or other things, they should have put the money on that. But then on the other hand, with this solution, they lower their costs for energy very, very much. So they will have money for many years for education and other parts. So I think it was a good investment for them.
Okay. Same question to you, Miguel.
Yeah, in our case, in our case, we have two experiences. One has been inside the Lighthouse city of Nottingham. They have implemented in terms of energy a pilot project in which they have retrofitted 10 houses following the Energy Sprong standard, which is a standard coming from the Netherlands. That is basically based on a kind of performance contracting with a very high energy performance in the buildings, where the public body owning the buildings acts as a kind of ESCO company. So they are getting the revenues through the payment of the energy bills from the tenants, and then they are paying the investment with this money. So they have implemented this pilot within the project, and now once they have demonstrated how it works and how successful has the model been, they are delivering a plan in the city in order to replicate this into 500 homes more. They are creating this plan between the municipality along with the national government and also with some other parties that are collaborating in delivering and implementing this plan, and they will start really soon on replicating this model. And then we have another example that has been replication in our follower cities. That is the case of the city of Segan. They've been working in the project on delivering feasibility plans in order to understand how some of the solutions could be replicated, and understanding that there is no direct replication, so there is need for adaptations in order to consider also the boundary conditions and so on. But they are now replicating some of the retrofitting actions that we have implemented in the Lighthouse cities, also integrated with some mobility actions in a big building that they are retrofitting in order to create a big shopping mall, where they are also integrating some of the mobility measures that we have implemented, for example, the charging infrastructure and also some smart technologies for parking. And they are creating this plan, and they will start also soon through a PPP, understanding how it worked in the Lighthouse cities, and learning from the Lighthouse cities on the best practices in order to be implemented and replicated.
Thank you. So you mentioned something very important. It's not just the replication from one city to the next one, but also in the same city.
Inside the cities.
Especially because we are talking several times about very big cities implementing it, and there it's the easiest step is to go inside the city, but even that is not always easy, as you can imagine. So Trinidad, what kind of examples would you like to highlight?
Well, in our case, we also have a similar approach that we had with Miguel, with the example I showed from Eindhoven. Actually, we started with the goal of refurbish 140 houses, and actually that's what we did in the project. But it was about planting a seed. Like, we plant the seed, we brought this opportunity for the tenants in Eindhoven, and now, for example, there are, I think, more than 500 houses within the district that are willing to continue outside the project scope. So that was also the same that Miguel is saying, like replicating within the city. But this house organization in the Netherlands also works in a national level, and we know already that they are planning to do the same that we did in Eindhoven in other Dutch cities. So we had this approach in a national level. But then, and also recurring to another example of the Lighthouse of city of Stavanger, there they implemented a tool that's called Blink, that it's a video tool for home care. So for example, if someone is sick at home, they can connect with their doctors via camera, and also to measure some of their health status, etc. And for example, that solution was developed in this Lighthouse city of Stavanger in Norway, but our follower cities, Sabadell and Prague, they were also developing within the project a strategy on how they want to tackle the smart cities challenges that they were facing. And they realized that this solution it was also addressing their challenges. So what we did within the project scope is that we also test this solution and help this test bed in the follower cities, and now they are preparing a strategy on how to deal with also home care. So we had also this test pilot on, well, how it works within our lighthouse city, that is Stavanger in Norway, but we also tested in the other two realities that are completely different. And that is about also upscaling and replicating the solutions to adapt, because we cannot just bring one solution from A to B, but we need to think also about the local needs and how to adapt our solutions to the needs of the, well, in this case it was Prague and Leipzig.
Yeah, and there's something that the lighthouses are doing now all together. They are taking all these sometimes very similar solutions and they're packaging them, because that's what Trinidad just said. It's not just about trying something and transporting it 100% to the next place without adapting it, but it's taking out the essentials of the solutions and putting in also the financial aspects, the citizen engagement aspects, the technical aspects, and kind of really concentrating on what is common in these solutions and what can be transported without much problems to the next place, and which are the aspects that absolutely have to be adapted to make it a success also in another place. So when you think about you being the first projects, now you were always the first, and now you have also the first ones that will have to think on how to scale up, replicate. What has been changed in the cities or in some of the cities as modus operandi? I mean, did they really say, okay, we didn't check this before, now this is really a good idea, we will go on with this? Also collaborating with other cities. So from being a city alone, we've been confronted with lots of big problems that seem to be just in their city, to being part of a big group, and now finally having also the access to this wealth of other cities, not just the fellow cities of the project and not just the lighthouse cities, but really this 117 cities all around Europe. What are the next steps that you think these cities that you work with will be going to do to tap into this wealth? Are there any projects in that direction? You are now the only real city representative, so it goes to you.
Yeah, well, in Stockholm, during this period, we have actually in our in the budget from our politicians, they have been emphasizing that we should work more with European projects, that it is important for us to get the input from other cities. And we have seen that so much in this project that there are so many experiences from Cologne and Barcelona, which we have in common. And now when we have this family with 17 projects with 2 to 3 lighthouse cities and the fellow cities, we're so many, and through this collaboration we are such a strength. So if we want to change something, we should be able to do that because we're so many, if we have the same experiences and learnings and things that we think should be changed. I think that's really important for us.
Yeah. And so from our side, the Commission obviously picked up on that rather early when we saw that this collaboration between the projects works quite well. So apart from having a big cluster that we now presented several times here, it's going also beyond, because the framework program of Horizon 2020 is coming to an end this year. So the last call for smart cities is still open, will close in next January. And then there have been 7 calls for smart cities and communities, as it was. But then the next one is coming up. So the next framework program is called very similar, Horizon Europe. And Horizon Europe has actually said, so far we have now some clusters, this is a very good example, but we want to go also beyond that on making it understandable for more people, because so far sometimes these projects are still seen as the nerdy, tech-heavy projects, and yeah, amongst themselves, they understand how much more there is in the collaboration also. But for that reason, there's something called the missions on cities. So in the next framework program, there will be something, let's say a overall structure or overall message, which will be a mission. A mission simply saying, at the moment the working title is still coming to 100 smart cities that are carbon neutral, that are climate neutral. I mean, this is still a discussion what it will be, but really pushing the borders on what these projects already have been doing, but pushing it from district scale to city scale, and then going forward also after 2030, where you have some of the cities, we actually have to put ourselves in the perspective that at 2050, if we are taking it seriously with a 2% goal or even below, then more or less all the big cities must be on a trajectory or already there, being carbon neutral, climate neutral, whatever you want to call it. So what has been done here was the first big step, and it's not just a small one, because really more than 100 cities, this is a critical mass that we have reached now, and going that step and pushing that really to the mainstream, so that obviously we cannot fund all the cities in Europe to do wonderful things like they have been doing, but at a certain moment it must be clear that after they tried out, after all the children illnesses have been erased, that this can be done. These are bankable projects and solutions. They have business models and business models behind them that make them financeable on a long term, sustainable also. And this is now really from replication to some of the cities and more to replication actually to the whole of Europe. Because else all the climate discussions are totally for naught. And I see Stockholm wants to chip in.
Yeah, I want to comment that, because I want to comment what you're saying, because I think next time when we do this kind of project, one of the two things we will emphasize much more on, and that is the replication within the city. Because as it is now, I think in many cities we're doing all these pilots, and it's really important to do these pilots, because demonstrating it's to show, as we have said during this presentation, to show that it is possible to do things. But the challenge is now to spread it in the whole city. And in our project application, we only had replication for other cities. We didn't have a plan for doing it in our own city. So actually now I've got some national funding to work on not only the GrowSmarter project, but other good projects that we have done in Stockholm, Stockholm, Gothenburg, and Malmö in Sweden. But we will, of course, also look at all the Lighthouse projects and see what are the good things from the different projects and what should be mainstream, what should be core business in the city, and how do we get there? What do we need? What kind of political decisions do we need, and what kind of documents, steering documents needs to be changed, or what kind of structured work do we need to change, and so on, and try to find those issues that now are in the way for making it mainstream. There are a lot of good results, and it's not just automatic spread out in the city.
Yeah, exactly. So that was a good lead over from the mission to actually the next framework program, as we already mentioned. So, Miguel, you have been now living through the life of a coordinator for 5 years for this big project, and obviously big consortium. We are not talking about amendments now. Okay. So, but what would you like to see in the next framework program, which will definitely have projects on smart cities and communities as well, that you didn't have now? Maybe nobody thought about them, but after 5 years you said that would be the next big thing that we absolutely have to go into with big projects of that type.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think something we have learned in the project is that if we would have implemented some kind of co-creation actions, probably we would have been more successful on some of the actions that we would have implemented. So probably co-creation is one of the elements that has to be there in the next generation of projects, in the terms that citizens are more engaged and participate more in the way in which actions are defined and implemented. implement it in the cities. And also I think the other element that has to be there is about long-term thinking. So this is really essential, thinking on the long term, not thinking on, well, the short term and we know how politicians work and they have, well, very short milestones. So we have to think on the long term, the long-term objectives that we want for the city and how we are giving an answer to these long-term objectives. So for me, these are the two elements that have to be there.
You, Trinidad? What would you like to see in the coming framework project? Which program?
Well, I think Miguel already mentioned most of my wishes, but another wish that I would have for the next mission is to make cities more inclusive, to bring really the whole citizenship together and to focus more on making our cities more inclusive. That will be one of the aspects, because we have the tools, and I said it also about when I talk about ICT, one thing is about the smartness and the technologies that we are developing, but another thing is to think about all the citizens we have, and I think that is, at least in this, it can be a really good mission that you can contribute for the next one. And another thing, and also related to inclusion, it is already proven that sustainability and gender balance, it's a really powerful tool in becoming cities more inclusive and also more livable. So I will also recommend you to work a bit more on how to include women into this sustainable dialogue and also within our cities. So I'm really proud that in my project we're almost only women running in them. So I see here some city representatives, also women, so we have a strong women consortium. But I think it's really essential to include this gender balance within the mission as well, to achieve sustainability in a long term, as Miguel said.
Yeah. Good lead over also. Are there any questions in the audience that you want to ask these distinguished coordinators here? Because last time we had actually 11 coordinators in the last Barcelona Expo and it was kind of last second and we didn't have time for any questions. Do you have any? Do you first of all have a microphone that can be given around? No microphone, then you would have to shout a little bit. Gerd, I'm looking at you. So, because Gerd is actually our another coordinator, all the hundreds of coordinators, but a very important one because she's coordinating the group of all the city coordinators. Because you heard there are 117 cities, and they all obviously have to do parts of the work in their cities. So the next step, which wasn't part of the first thinking when we called for that, it was actually to give a very prominent role also to the cities, not just the Lighthouse cities, because the visibility is there, but even there sometimes there's still, you have to understand there's a very big consortium, 40 entities or more, and some of them are cities. In some cases you have actually a Lighthouse city and the coordinator comes from the Lighthouse city, which is Lisa's case. In others, coordinators are coming from research institutes or other entities. So now to give a voice to everybody in this huge, I mean, just multiply the 17 by more or less 40 and you know how many entities are involved. But the cities are obviously the ones that are very dear to our heart. So now what Gerd is actually trying to do is bringing together all the cities and canalizing the voice of all the cities so that they go along also with the main voice of the Lighthouse project as such. And we're just starting with this now. I can tell you it's still a long ride. We're putting now a big contract up for the next 5 years, which will actually help all the Lighthouse projects that are coming to an end, like those, but all the ones also that they are joining now, because I said the last call is yet not even closed, so we don't even know who applied for it. So it's a very stretched, very long, very big process and group. And now from next spring on, there will be also a call for tender on how actually that will be there to support all these entities and also specifically the cities to make this not just a good idea to collaborate with the other cities and the other partners, but really give them a structure. And that is still a very, very big way to go. But we are really convinced that after having seen how well it worked already on an almost voluntary basis, because these are still projects that didn't have any money to collaborate amongst themselves. Afterwards we saw, okay, that really works. We put first 2 and then 5% in. So afterwards they have collaboration budget. But they did it without. So I would say that this was already, you are not just the first ones, but you also started something and helped others then to go forward. And if there are no further questions, actually I would close the session here, or do we have any questions? There's one, wonderful, Albert.
Maybe you'll have to go with your mic there.
Talk to my ear. Doesn't work.
You have to talk in.
Wait, you talk in my ear, okay?
I want to invite them to the booth B140.
Okay, I'll do so. Okay, we have obviously also a big booth or stand, which is in the other, directly when you enter in the other one, in the other hall. It's just the first one that just is there awaiting for you. And we will have more of the coordinators, some of them here already in the audience, be there, able to answer any kind of questions, be there discussions with you. So I invite you to pass by there. As I said, it's very hard to miss it. It's just at the entrance of the other hall. Triangulum.
Just to add one thing that also regarding we are the 3 first, but we have this big family. And we just presented here what the 3 projects, the first projects did. So when we were writing our paper, we also thought and discussed that at the end, it is a big snowball effect. We are just the beginning of something. And imagine if, well, you saw already our impact that we had, but this will be replicated into 15 or I don't know how many projects will be also in the future. So we are putting the stepping stone, but this impact that you saw here, it's being increased in Europe worldwide thanks to this initiative. So we are really happy to be part of it.
And then, talking about this, actually, I mean, these are not all the 17, but there are 2 ones that are not lighthouses that you should notice, which is actually the European Innovation Partnership, which will be also one of the main topics actually that you will see also in this stand. The Innovation Partnership is something that is even older than the Lighthouse project cycle. It's now closing to, I mean, it's coming to its first decade almost. This is something where you can also go without having the Horizon funding, because this is actually our grassroots movement. These are more than 7,000, or are we now more? Something around that. Partners that are working together on the solution. Some of them found their partners for this Lighthouse projects also in this ambient, but it's generally we are working on different topics there. And all practitioners, from be it architects, be it from cities, be it from other solution providers, or simply from interested people, they will be able to come together there. And if you want to learn more about that, you can also do this with all the staff that we have over there in the booth. And then, obviously, to make not everything just a wonderful project and poof, it's over and it's lost. We have an information system, and this is even older because there we go back to almost 15 years now of projects that since we started something that was in the direction of smart cities has delivered all their results into this, and this is now being updated. So whatever you want to know as nitty-gritty details, that will be in the information system, which is now being merged actually with the marketplace. And then I come to the third one, which you don't even really see here, because this thingy has also a marketplace. So meaning we talk about solutions, we talk about funded solutions, but then the marketplace is the next one that will actually bring together the finance part and the solution part. You will hear in some other sessions during these 3 days also something about the marketplace. So that is something very interesting, because there we bring in financiers. So people, big pension funds, for instance, that say, okay, I have 500 million lying around, how do I invest them best? What is a sustainable way? And they are there. So if you really want to be serious about your solutions, you should have a look at this, because we're doing this kind of matchmaking, and the matchmaking will lead you through first off a step where you can see what is out there, then to going more concrete, and then actually the last step, which would be obviously the most important then, to really coming to contracts and getting your stuff financed. So you see, we have everything from starting to try out new, very innovative stuff that is rather risky, bringing them together in a community, sharing it, but also building on it, extracting the solutions that are common, packaging them, bringing in the financing, giving you the possibility to actually, to everybody, to tap into this knowledge through an information system. And then also, obviously, for our policy part, listening to what has happened and incorporating it in our energy policy, also the transport policy and the ICT policy, because we are working with 2 other DGs together, and bringing it into the next funding project. So I think, and here the cycle closes. I saw the 5-minute sign, so now it's last. And I thank you very much for your attention and hope to see you at the booth.